Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. If you've ever sat in a room full of laughter and still felt like a ghost, this one's for you. It started with the red wine stain, a perfect oval, soaking into the white linen next to my untouched plate. I had asked the waiter to leave the glass full. I wasn't drinking. I just didn't want the seat to look abandoned. Across the table, her seat was empty. Again, it was the third time she'd gotten up. First to greet someone from HR, then to compliment someone's dress. And now she was leaning over the balcony, chatting with the same guy she once called weirdly flirty. It was my company's annual fall gala. I'd helped plan it. I'd picked the venue. I even ordered extra vegetarian options so Dana wouldn't have to pretend to eat something just to be polite. And she hadn't even looked at me once since arriving. The room buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and a DJ playing synth-pop remixes of songs I used to like. Every table was full. Every table, but ours had couples talking, laughing, existing together. I sat there with my blazer buttoned too high and my napkin folded too perfectly and realized something no one wants to admit. Sometimes, being forgotten doesn't happen suddenly. Sometimes it happens one small silence at a time. One shrug. One, "I'll be right back." One missed glance. I watched her from the corner of my eye. The way she touched his sleeve, leaned a little too close, laughed just a second too long. I recognized that laugh. It used to be mine. The music shifted. My boss tapped a spoon against a glass, announcing a toast. People gathered. I stood, expecting her to return, to slide back into her chair like she belonged next to me. She didn't. I raised my glass alone, and when I turned to find her, to see if maybe she'd just gotten caught in a conversation, she was gone. Not in the hallway. Not in the restroom. Nowhere near the food or bar. Then I saw her. Back on the balcony. Just her and him. No crowd. No reason. No excuse. That's when something in me flipped. Not anger. Not sadness. Just stillness. I walked out of the ballroom. Not storming. Not slamming anything. Just quietly. Like someone who didn't want to ruin the mood of a party that wasn't theirs. I took the elevator down. I sat in the lobby. And I waited. Not for her. For the text. And sure enough, 20 minutes later. "Where did you go?" Suddenly, I existed again. Because she thought I had left. But I hadn't. Not yet. And what I saw when I returned, when I silently stepped back into that glittering room like a ghost with a beating heart, changed everything. The moment I stepped back into the ballroom, something strange happened. No one noticed. Not her, not the guy she was with, not even the server who had earlier apologized for spilling water on my shoe. I was invisible again, drifting between groups of coworkers and spouses like I didn't belong to the event I'd helped bring to life. But maybe that was the point. I didn't feel like I belonged anymore. Not to the celebration, and not to her. I didn't walk straight toward them. I stayed on the edge, near the dessert table. From there, I had a clear view of the balcony, and there she was, Dana, still laughing at something he'd said, brushing her hair behind her ear in that way that always meant she was nervous or flirting. I watched her hold her wine glass with one hand and touch his shoulder with the other, almost like she'd forgotten what ring she was wearing. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. Her body language was screaming things I wish I hadn't learned how to read so well. And then he leaned in. It wasn't a kiss, but it was close. Too close. The kind of closeness you save for someone you're not married to. Something in me wanted to charge forward and demand answers. But the rest of me, the more honest part, knew better. Dana wouldn't give me answers. She'd give me deflection. She'd tell me I was imagining things. That I was being dramatic again. So instead, I took out my phone and took a photo. Not for revenge. Not for leverage. Just because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I needed to be able to look at it tomorrow and say, this is real. This happened. Then I did something I never thought I would. I walked over to our table, grabbed her clutch, and left the ballroom a second time. But I didn't go far. I waited outside the venue, sitting at one of those high-top patio tables with a heat lamp buzzing above me. I texted her. "Left your bag at the table. Heading out. Congrats on the new promotion. You and Calvin make a great team." Sent. Nothing more. I didn't say I was joking. I didn't ask her to come out. I didn't explain the message. 10 minutes later, she appeared. Alone. Still glowing, still perfect. She looked around with that same half-panicked, half-annoyed look she used to get when she misplaced her phone. When she finally spotted me, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She walked toward me slowly, heels tapping like a metronome, and said, What's your problem? That was her first sentence. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. I stayed seated. You tell me. You seemed happy tonight, just not with me. She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms, and for a moment, I could tell she was choosing between a dozen lies, trying to decide which one I was dumb enough to believe. We were just talking, Meryl. God, it's a party. You're so insecure. There it was. The word she always used when she wanted to make me feel small. Insecure. As if the problem was my perception, not her actions. I watched you ignore me for 2 hours, I said calmly. You didn't even clap during the speech. You didn't look for me once. I disappeared, and you didn't notice until I was gone. Do you know what that feels like? She didn't answer. She just shook her head and said something I'll never forget. You're always making everything about you. That's when I knew, whatever this marriage had once been, it wasn't that anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood up, handed her the clutch, and said, next time, just come alone. It'll save us both the trouble. Then I walked away for real. Not with dramatic music. Not with the slam of the door. Just the quiet sound of shoes on concrete, and a realization heavier than anything I'd ever carried. But that wasn't the end. What happened the next morning would shake everything loose. Because someone else had been watching that balcony too, and they saw something even I didn't. I didn't sleep that night. I don't mean that in the poetic, I lay awake thinking kind of way. I mean I literally didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed while Dana snored lightly next to me, unaware that I'd been staring at the ceiling for hours, trying to convince myself that what I saw wasn't what I thought it was, that it had all been some warped combination of jealousy and miscommunication, like she always says when I get too sensitive. At 5:17 a.m., I gave up trying and got dressed quietly. I made a pot of coffee, not because I needed caffeine. My body was already in full alarm mode, but because I needed something normal to do with my hands. The plan was to go into work early. I wanted space, time, routine. But fate, or something worse, had other ideas. Right before leaving, I checked my email, just to clear out the inbox, feel in control of something. That's when I noticed it, an auto-forwarded thread labeled Re. Langston Photos, balcony shot. The name didn't register at first. It was from the event photographer, some outsourced freelancer our company had hired. It was supposed to go to the media team, but for some reason, because I was one of the planning coordinators, it hit my inbox too. I opened it. The photo was sharp. Dana, mid-laugh, standing too close to Calvin, his hand resting just a little too low on her back. Her head tilted, exposing her neck like she was welcoming his attention. Behind them, city lights and shadows. And in the corner of the frame, my face. Not looking at them. Not watching. Just me, blurred, walking away from the ballroom door. I didn't know how to describe what that image did to me. It was proof, yes, but it was also prophecy. Like the universe took a snapshot of the exact second I let go without realizing it. But the kicker? The part that turned my stomach? Attached beneath the photo was a reply from Calvin. He'd written, "That moment, though." And Dana had replied, "Haha. Busted, let's hope my husband didn't notice." It was forwarded unintentionally. The entire thread, meant for the media team's photo selection. But the email client had glitched, or auto-filled, or, I don't even know. I just sat there staring at those words. Let's hope my husband didn't notice. Not, he misunderstood. Not, we didn't mean anything. Not even a shred of remorse. Just a digital wink and a wish that I was still naive enough to swallow it all. I didn't go to work. I didn't even get in the car. I sat at the kitchen table for over an hour, listening to the sound of the coffee maker drip like it was ticking down to something, like it knew what I was about to do. At 6:43, Dana walked into the kitchen wrapped in a robe, stretching like she had no weight in the world. She gave me that same casual smile she always did after a good night of being the center of attention. Then she froze when she saw the laptop open, and the photo on the screen, and the thread beneath it. "Where did you get that?" she asked, voice too calm. "Does it matter?" I said. She moved slowly, cautiously, like I was some glass sculpture she didn't want to knock over too hard. "It's not what it looks like." I didn't reply, because I already knew that's what people say when it's exactly what it looks like. She tried again, sitting across from me. "Calvin always jokes like that. You know how he is." "Sure," I said. "But what about you?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean? What kind of person jokes like that with a coworker about their marriage? What kind of person calls that moment busted, like it's some fun little inside secret?" What kind of person worries about whether their husband noticed, instead of whether he's hurting? She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. Maybe she didn't. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fix things. I wasn't explaining away the pain. I wasn't trying to be the bigger man. I was just watching her. Like I was looking at a stranger who'd been borrowing my wife's face for a long time. She didn't answer any of those questions. Instead, she stood up and muttered, "You're overreacting. I'm not going to be interrogated over a stupid email." And just like that, she walked out of the kitchen. As if this was some minor inconvenience she could shake off by ignoring it long enough. But I didn't move. I sat in silence. And I started planning. Because if she didn't take this seriously, then maybe someone else should. And I already had one photo. What I did with it next changed everything. It took me a few hours to stop shaking. Not from rage. I wasn't there yet. I wasn't throwing things or pacing or screaming into a towel. It was something colder than rage. Something that crept into my bones and made everything feel slowed down. My movements, my thoughts, even my breathing. It all felt like I was wading through syrup. I didn't talk to Dana for the rest of the day. She stayed in the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen. The only sound was Poppy scratching at the back door and the occasional ding of a text neither of us responded to. By 4 p.m., I'd made a decision. Not to leave. Not yet. But to act. I pulled out my old USB drive, the one I hadn't used in years, and copied the photo. Just the photo. No commentary, no edits, no subject line. I put it in a folder titled HR_consideration_2025. It was a dumb name, intentionally vague. Then I added one line in a notepad file. Just so you're aware of potential boundary issues among staff. And I sent it to her work email. From an anonymous burner Gmail I made in 5 minutes. No name. No signature. Just silence. Then I waited. And something strange happened. I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm. Like I was taking back a small piece of myself. Not to humiliate her. Not to destroy her. But because I knew, deep down, that if I let this slide, she'd do it again. Maybe not with Calvin. Maybe not even this year. But one day, somewhere down the line, she'd write off another betrayal as a joke, and I'd be expected to swallow it. This time, I wanted the consequences to arrive before the next mistake. By dinner, I was microwaving leftover pasta when Dana emerged from the bedroom with her hair pulled up and her phone in her hand. Her face was tight. Not panic, not fear. Just controlled tension. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "I got an email from compliance," she said quietly. I kept stirring the pasta, pretending not to know. "Yeah. They said someone submitted a photo anonymously. From the event. Said it might be inappropriate." "Oh," I said, letting the spoon clink against the bowl. "Weird." She looked at me then, sharply. "You think this is funny?" "No," I replied flatly. "I think it's overdue." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She was searching for the angle, the leverage point where she could twist this back around into my issue. But there was nothing left to work with. I wasn't giving her guilt. I wasn't playing the wounded puppy. I was just there. Tired. Done. "You could have talked to me," she snapped. "I tried," I said. "You laughed it off. You walked away." "This is my job, Meryl." And what was I? Background noise. A +1 you didn't ask for. Silence. Then she said it. The line that really cemented what she thought of me. "I can't believe you'd be this petty." Petty. Not hurt. Not betrayed. Petty. Like I was the one making drama for fun. Like my marriage unraveling in real time was just some childish tantrum because I wasn't the most interesting man at a party. That's when I stopped talking. I picked up my bowl, walked past her, and went to the living room. She didn't follow. She stood there for a second, then turned back into the bedroom and closed the door. And that night, while she lay under the covers scrolling through her phone with the screen turned away from me, I sat on the couch and wrote out everything I could remember. Every moment over the past 2 years where something felt off. Every late night that didn't add up. Every vague excuse. Every "it's just work" stuff that came with a slightly too defensive tone. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about patterns. And the more I wrote, the more I realized something terrifying. The party? That wasn't the beginning. It was the confirmation. And the truth behind it, the part one hadn't even seen yet, was still waiting to surface. And when it did, it wouldn't just shake our marriage. It would destroy her career. 2 days passed. Dana barely spoke to me. The air between us had changed, not like a thunderstorm, not loud or aggressive. It was more like stale fog that clung to everything. No arguments. No apologies. Just two people tiptoeing around the remains of a fire they both pretended wasn't still smoldering. I hadn't told anyone about the email I'd sent to her company. I didn't want sympathy, and I certainly didn't want advice. Most people don't understand what it's like to watch your marriage rot from the inside out, while the outside still looks pristine enough to post on Instagram. But on the third day, something happened that made the whole situation spiral into a completely new direction. I got a message from Calvin. It wasn't an email. It was a direct message on LinkedIn of all places, a platform I hadn't checked in weeks. His name popped up with that bland, professional notification tone, like it was just another recruiter or endorsement. But the moment I read his first sentence, my stomach turned cold. "Meryl, I think we should talk. This situation is getting out of hand." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I closed the tab, opened it again, then closed it once more. I walked away from my desk, paced the hallway, came back, and reread the message a dozen times. It was polite, cautious, the kind of tone you use when you're not sure if the other person is holding a knife or a handshake. I finally replied 4 hours later, short and sharp. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" His response came fast. "I didn't mean to cause issues between you and Dana. I think things were misinterpreted. But with HR now involved, I feel like I need to clear the air. Face to face if you're open to it." Clear the air. Misinterpreted. That word again. He wanted a meeting. I should have said no. I should have deleted the message and blocked him. But something in me, maybe the masochist, maybe the part still desperate for clarity, agreed. We picked a neutral location, a coffee shop not far from my office. Midday, lots of foot traffic, nothing dramatic. He arrived 10 minutes early. Of course he did. He wore that same polished, casual cool outfit I remembered from the gala. Leather strap watch, rolled sleeves, charming but not threatening cologne. I hated how rehearsed it all felt. He stood as I approached and extended a hand like we were two professionals meeting about Q4 performance. I shook it, but didn't sit immediately. "I'm not here to argue," he started. "I just want to explain." "I didn't ask for an explanation," I said flatly, but I sat anyway. He nodded like he expected resistance. "Look, Dana and I, we're friends. Yes, we flirt sometimes. That's just how she is. It's harmless." "Harmless for who?" He paused. "I didn't cross a line, Meryl." I leaned forward. "Then why did HR contact you?" He hesitated, just long enough for me to catch it. "Because someone sent them a photo out of context. It looked worse than it was." "Out of context," I repeated. "The context was my wife leaning into you, touching you, while I stood a few feet away being ignored the entire night. Which part do you think got misunderstood?" He ran a hand through his hair and dropped his gaze. "I don't want things to get ugly. Not for her. And definitely not for me." And that sentence, was the first honest thing he'd said. He wasn't here to make peace. He was here to protect himself. "I don't care what happens to you," I said, voice low and steady. "But I do care about the truth. And right now, the truth is buried under months of casual secrets and convenient amnesia. So unless you've got something real to say, this conversation is over." I stood. He didn't stop me. But just before I turned to leave, he said something that froze me in place. "She told me you already knew about Chicago." I slowly turned back. "What?" He blinked. "Wait, you don't. What are you talking about?" He looked instantly pale. His hand gripped the edge of the table like he'd just realized he'd slipped. "I thought she told you." "I shouldn't have." "What happened? In Chicago?" He swallowed hard, then shook his head. "Nothing. Forget it. If you didn't know, just forget I said anything." But I couldn't forget. And I didn't go home after that. I drove straight to the office, locked myself in the conference room, and started digging. I logged into our shared calendar, our flight history, our old emails. And that's when I found it. A business conference. In Chicago. 2 months ago. 3 nights. She told me it was a last-minute company retreat. She said they were short-staffed, that she'd be in meetings all day. She even brought back a paperweight with the logo of a logistics firm I'd never heard of. I never questioned it. Until now. And sitting there in that empty conference room, staring at that trip itinerary, I realized the gala wasn't the first betrayal. It was just the one I finally caught. I don't know what hurts more, the betrayal you see with your own eyes, or the betrayal you missed because you trusted someone too much to even look. The trip to Chicago had been right in front of me the whole time. Dana had even shown me the hotel receipt like it was no big deal, like transparency equaled truth. And maybe it would have been if she hadn't lied about who she was with. I called the hotel. I didn't even expect them to give me anything, but when I told them I was confirming a dual reservation for expense reporting, they asked if I wanted both names on the invoice. Both names. 2 people. 1 room. Not even 2 queens. A king. And the second name? Calvin. I thanked the woman, hung up, and stared at the wall like it might open up and swallow me whole. All this time I'd been replaying that night at the gala, dissecting body language and wine glass placement like some desperate detective with only a hunch and a broken heart to guide him. And the truth had already happened weeks before. While I was home feeding Poppy and fixing a leaking sink, Dana had been sharing a hotel bed with someone who still thought emojis could erase guilt. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I even wanted the release, the emotional reset that comes with sobbing until you can't breathe. But nothing came. Just this dull ache that pressed against the inside of my ribs like a fist that never unclenched. I sat in that conference room for hours. People came and went, tapping on the glass to see if I was done. I waved them off like it was nothing. Eventually, the lights turned off automatically. I didn't even notice until I saw my reflection staring back at me in the black screen of my laptop. At some point, I realized I wasn't angry at Dana for cheating. I was angry because she made me feel small for suspecting it. For months, maybe longer, she'd been painting me as paranoid, oversensitive, dramatic, while she was out crafting a whole other life just across state lines. A version of herself she never brought home. A version that laughed harder, dressed differently, touched someone else's arm when she was nervous. When I finally went home that night, the house was dark except for the kitchen light. Dana was sitting at the table with a mug of tea and that look she always put on when she thought she was the one being wronged. Like she was preparing a closing argument for a courtroom she already assumed she'd win. "I heard you met with Calvin," she said. I didn't answer. I placed my keys on the counter, opened the fridge, closed it again without taking anything. "You went behind my back. Emailed HR. Dredged up something that wasn't even real." "It was real enough for a hotel," I said. Her face didn't move. No flinch. No crack. "What do you want me to say, Meryl? That it was a mistake? That I regret it? Fine. I do. But I didn't think you'd ever actually look. You're not the type." I blinked. "What does that mean?" She exhaled slowly, like she was disappointed I hadn't figured it out already. "You're the guy who stays. Who forgives. Who writes long emails about feelings and over-explains everything to keep the peace. I never thought you'd get angry enough to do something." There it was. The truth. She didn't cheat because she didn't love me. She cheated because she thought I wouldn't do anything about it. Because I'd been safe. Predictable. Too soft to confront. Too loyal to leave. She stood then, taking a sip of tea like it was some cozy evening and not the unraveling of everything we built. "I guess I misjudged you." I smiled. And not the sad, broken kind I'd given her a dozen times before. This smile was something else. "Yeah," I said. "You did." I didn't sleep in our room that night. I took a blanket to the guest room and shut the door. But I didn't just lie down. I stayed up writing something. Not a letter. Not a goodbye. A timeline. Every lie. Every half-truth. Every date that didn't add up. Every receipt. Every excuse. Every clue I'd dismissed out of love. Because if she thought I was done, if she thought my silence meant surrender, she was about to learn what it looks like when the quiet one starts talking. And I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to show her the mirror she refused to look into. And then, I'd decide if she deserved to stay in this house at all. The thing about writing down every lie is that changes you. You start by just listing facts, trying to piece together a timeline so your mind doesn't spiral into imaginary betrayals. But somewhere in the middle, the facts stop feeling like facts. They start feeling like proof that the person you loved never really saw you as more than a fixture. A placeholder. A man-shaped pause between her stories. By the time I finished typing, it was past 3 a.m. I didn't just have a timeline. I had a case. Not in the legal sense. I wasn't preparing for court. But in the human sense, in the "this is who I am and what I've tolerated" sense. It was the clearest thing I'd ever written. Date-stamped moments of trust being fractured over and over again, until the only thing left was the echo of my own silence. That morning, I printed it. For pages. Neatly formatted. I placed it in a plain white envelope and left it on the kitchen counter before I drove to work. No note. No explanation. If she had questions, they were already answered in the timeline. I spent most of that workday in a strange emotional limbo. Not angry, not even sad anymore. I felt hollow, but not in a depressing way. More like an empty glass just before it's filled with something new. There was this quiet sense of preparation humming under my skin, like I was finally on the edge of my own life again. By noon, Dana hadn't texted. By 3 p.m., still nothing. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I saw the envelope, now opened and slightly crumpled, sitting on the kitchen table. She was pacing, her expression unreadable, but her eyes were different. Not guilty, not ashamed, panicked. "You went through everything?" she asked before I even set my keys down. "No," I said calmly. "You went through everything. I just documented it." She tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "What is this supposed to be, Meryl? Some kind of dramatic manifesto?" "It's a record. For both of us. So when this gets worse, and it will, we won't have to guess how it happened. We'll know." Her jaw clenched. "So that's it. You're trying to build a case against me? Over texts and glances and one stupid weekend? You think this is about one weekend?" I shook my head. "This is about years. About how you made me feel crazy for noticing the distance. About how every time I reached for you, you pulled away just enough to keep me hoping. This is about how you turned my loyalty into a leash." Her voice rose. "You're twisting everything. We were just stuck. Every couple hits a rut. But you turn into someone who watches from corners and takes screenshots and acts like a martyr." "No," I said louder now. "I turned into someone who got tired of being gaslit in his own marriage." Silence. Then softer, with a hint of venom. "So what? You want a divorce now? Is that what this is?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know. I had spent so long trying to save the marriage that I'd never considered what it might mean to let it go. But I did know this. I couldn't unsee the truth anymore. "I want to feel safe in my own home again," I said finally. "I want to be with someone who doesn't think love is a contest between secrecy and forgiveness. And I want to stop apologizing for asking to be treated like I matter." She stared at me like I'd just spoken a language she'd never learned. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "You love me." "I did," I said. "And I still do. But love isn't a hall pass." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry, and I didn't comfort her. For the first time, I let her sit in the weight of what she'd done. Not to punish her, not to win, but because I finally realized my silence had protected her more than it ever protected me. And maybe that was over now. What happened next wasn't explosive. It was worse. She made a call. I overheard one line that made my blood turn to ice. "You need to fix this before it goes further. He knows everything." That night, I realized something bigger was at play. Because Calvin? He wasn't the only one. And Dana? She had a reason to be scared that had nothing to do with me. That final night didn't end in a fight. No broken plates. No screaming match. No late-night apologies whispered through gritted teeth. Just truth. Dana never admitted everything, not out loud. But she didn't have to. I could see it in the way her defenses crumbled, in the way she kept checking her phone like she was waiting for Calvin or someone else to come save her from the reality she had built. But no one came, and I didn't follow her anymore. Instead, I packed a single bag. Just the essentials, not out of pettiness, but because I didn't need to prove anything. I wasn't storming out for show. I was simply choosing myself, maybe for the first time in years. As I zipped up the bag, Dana sat on the edge of the bed, watching me like a stranger passing through. "So that's it?" she asked, not even angry, just small. "No," I said. "This is the start." She didn't ask where I was going. I think deep down she knew it wasn't about geography. It was about space, about peace, about reclaiming the version of me that didn't shrink every time she withheld affection or twisted the truth. I stayed at my brother's guest house for a while. It wasn't glamorous. The water pressure was awful and the couch squeaked every time I moved. But for the first time in years, I slept without waiting for the sound of the bedroom door clicking shut behind me. And then, the real surprise came. 2 weeks after I left, I got an email from someone in Dana's HR department. Not accusatory, just procedural. They were conducting an internal ethics review. Apparently, Calvin wasn't the only person Dana had mentored a little too closely. There were others. And the Chicago trip? It hadn't been her first. Just the first I was forced to see. I didn't respond. It wasn't mine to clean up anymore. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I took myself out to breakfast. Just me, a worn paperback, and a corner booth at a diner with bad coffee and great hash browns. No awkward silences. No forced smiles. No second-guessing whether I was enough. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the ghost in the room. I felt real. A few months later, I filed for divorce. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitter. It was just the natural conclusion to a story that had stopped being about love and started being about damage control. Now, I'm not saying everything's perfect. There are still moments where I second-guess, where I wonder if I waited too long, if I should have tried harder, sooner, louder. But then I remember, survival isn't weakness. Silence isn't peace. And loyalty shouldn't be a leash. And I remind myself that walking away wasn't failure. It was freedom. So, if you've made it this far, thanks for listening. Really. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a moment where you saw everything clearly, like a veil finally lifted, and you knew your life had to change? Drop it in the comments. Share your turning point. Someone might need to hear it. And if you're new here, welcome to Reddit Confessions. This is where the quiet ones finally speak.